tax rate in chat, if you know what the corporate tax rate is. A bunch of you guys know it. 20, 20, 40, 21, 28, 17, 21, 20, 21. It's 21% on your net. And it used to be up to 39%. Nobody says 35%. It's not. The highest rate was actually 39%, and then the more money it made, it dropped. And then somebody says 0 if Anderson does your taxes, right? Sometimes we push some money into it. I'll give you guys an example. I had a client making take home about $3 million a year, and we were able to put about $1 million of it to sit in the corporation. And the reason we were doing that is because we used that corporation then to be a lending vehicle. And so he was saving, in his particular case, it was saving upwards of 20% on the tax bill for that year. So it cut his tax bill in half, in essence, on those dollars. He was in the highest tax bracket plus some state. So he was going to be paying a lot more. The corporation was paying 21%. He was paying 37% plus, I think it was 8%. So his total tax rate on every dollar above a certain amount, he was sitting at, I think when you calculate it out, SALT took away the deduction for the state taxes, that's right. He was sitting at about 45%, and so he's at 21%. So he's saving 23 cents on the dollar, right? So that's pretty good. Somebody says I'm not seeing anything on the whiteboard. Really? You guys can't see it? Let me know if there's any issues. It might be that it's not coming through on you. Everybody else can see it. So we have the 21%. So, and then the question is, how do I get it out? And then somebody else says, we can see it, right? Everybody else can see it. So it might be just you might have to turn down your whiteness of the color because it might be bleeding it out. It's in red. Then people say, well, there's double tax, right? They go, oh, but there's a double tax, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's if you pay out dividends. And if you pay out dividends, it's taxed as long-term capital gains. So it used to be a big problem when you had 39% corporate tax and dividends were at your ordinary rate. You'd be getting hit at another 39%, right? So, yeah, somebody said contrast. I said the whiteness. I suppose I'm not supposed to say that. But so you could get really killed in taxes. That was prior to 2003. So, but the accountants never stopped repeating what they learned in school. And rather than doing the math, if you do the math, you know that the long-term capital gains, I'm just going to write this up real quick, is 0, 15, or 20%, depending on your tax bracket, or really depending on how much you make. It kind of follows the tax bracket. The highest tax bracket, you're going to be at 20%. And if you know how deductions work, you're writing off the corporate tax. You're not paying tax on the amount that you distribute is what's left. You're really at a 36% tax bracket. So I always say, well, okay, worst case scenario is you're no worse off. Best case scenario is you leave it in the corporation and you start to be, what you do is you use it as a vehicle to loan to your other operations. And yeah, you have to pay some interest. We'll show you there's a bunch of ways to get money out. But what's really, really cool is you are paying the money, you're writing it off anyway. It's going to the corporation. Corporation now still has access to that money. It did not pay the extra, let's say it's $100,000 that we put in there, so it saved about $20,000. So there's an extra 60 versus 80, right? So we're sitting there with money that we wouldn't otherwise have, and it's still growing. And remember how Clint said the only exposure you have inside of an LLC is the equity of a property. There's no better way than to actually encumber a property than to use the money from your own corporation. That's a fantastic way to actually encumber properties and keep your exposure low. These things all work together. The third type of corporation that everybody misses is actually a nonprofit. And I use something called a 501c3, which is a charitable organization. And again, we've done over 4,000 of these. You work like a charm. One of the fun things about having your own 501c3 is you could be doing activities that you would ordinarily be doing anyway in your individual name. And you can get a write-off in the beginning for doing it. So, for example, if I was going to flip a house and I was doing this for in a disadvantaged neighborhood, doing areas where I'm helping veterans out, or I'm working for single moms. I'm giving you real life examples, or housing for at-risk youth, or housing for autistic adults, or residential assisted living, you name it. If I am helping a group out that is a disadvantaged group, then it qualifies as a nonprofit activity. And if I'm doing that inside the 501c3, I can do it. So if I was going to flip a house, for example, individually, and I put $100,000 to buy the house, I don't get a deduction. Now let's say I do that through a 501c3 and I put $100,000 in there to acquire the house. I get a $100,000 deduction the day that I start. I just got $100,000. And let's say it makes $100,000 on the flip, there's no tax, right? The only way I make a tax is if I pay it out. So these two guys right here, the taxes stop in the entity. And then I have to do something to create a taxable event to me. So if you are a high income earner, these are your friends. These are the things where you say, if I have income and I can redirect it into those things, or if I, like, obviously I can redirect it into a nonprofit. I can just give it cash. I could give it an asset. Here's a fun one. You could give it a house that you've had for 10 years. And you get to write off, the deduction is the fair market value of the house, not what you paid for it. So I could go over there and toss that off to somebody says I have to expand. Oh, I see what you're saying. Somebody could say, hey, I have this house. I've been sitting on it for all these years. I bought it. It was $50,000. I'll give a real life example. I bought one for $30,000 here. We put about $8,000 in it. Over the years, we probably put another 10, and it's worth 300-some thousand. I could toss that into a nonprofit tomorrow, and I get a $300,000 deduction, which saves me somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000, right? That's more than what I put in the house. But the nonprofit now owns it. But that's fine, especially if you have money where you're like, hey, I don't want exposure. I don't want to have to worry about my going probating these things. These are a magic vehicle because nobody owns the nonprofit. You can give control to your heirs. You can give it to a spouse and then to the eldest kid, or you can give it to a committee, or you can do whatever. And if you think I'm crazy, look at what IKEA did, because that's exactly how we set it up. 1/3 of the company is technically owned by the children. 2/3 are owned through two different nonprofits. And they legitimately, all this stuff has been done for decades. When he passed away a few years ago, it was like, hey, wait a second, whoa, the kids are, they can't sell IKEA. Duh, because he didn't want the kids to sell IKEA. That was his baby. And he wanted to, in his aggregate tax bracket all those years is about 3%. You think that might have had something to do with its success? Yeah, somebody did SurveyMonkey. Yep, there's a whole bunch of these. The one example I could love to give, if you ever come to nonprofit, is Hershey. No kids. They set this thing up back in 1905. It's worth over $12 billion now and educates over 2,000 orphans. It's a school, and they have a hospital, they have a museum, they have a cemetery, all this stuff. You can't get out of the way of these things because they never pay tax. Anyway, partnership, this flows down to the partners. It files a 1065. So if you ever hear somebody say, I file a 1065, well, that's a partnership return. Yay. It passes down to the owners, to the partners. So the partners get something called a K1. That is their portion of profits and losses. I should tell you that the S Corp does the same thing. It's a K1. Both go on page 2 of your Schedule E. So if you ever hear somebody saying, hey, we really want this on your Schedule E, you have page 1, which is your real estate that you hold in your individual name. That's investment real estate, not your personal house, but investment business property. And then you have page 2, which is your passive holdings. So you have your, or partnership holdings. You can be an active participant here in either of these. And then you have 401ks. 401ks, and by the way, that one, it flows on to you. So if you're a member of a partnership, it flows onto your return. This is a big one for stock traders. And the reason being is because if you are a stock trader and you own it, it flows onto your 1040. We had miscellaneous itemized deductions removed from our taxes under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. You can't write off your miscellaneous itemized deductions anymore. It went away. There's no such thing on your Schedule A. Don't believe me? Go take a peek. that's where your management fees that you'd be paying to somebody would go on if you have your account managed and other things. If you want to be able to write those things off, here's what you do. You say, that stinks. I don't want it to go under my 1040. So you have a corporation as a partner, and then you paid a guaranteed payment to partner, and voila, now we only have a net amount that flows under your return. So if you guys didn't catch that, don't worry. You'll start getting this lingo. It takes a little bit. It's a fancy way of saying, now we can write it off. So if you're a stock trader and somebody told you to be an LLC or whatever, no. And if you're thinking about filing as a trader, stop. That is a pathway that is littered with corpses. It's like the Walking Dead in tax world. Everybody gets nuked in that thing. So they're all sick and eating each other. Right? So we don't want to have trader status. We don't want to mess around with that stuff. So anyway, then 401ks. 401ks, again, it stops. It's at a 5,500 until you do something. And you're compelled to do something. At the age of 72, you have to start taking distributions. Required minimum distributions. About 4%. It's not the end of the world, right? You're going to start taking income. But in the meantime, it's deferred. We will go over these again when we talk about deferred income. But this is absolutely fantastic. Somebody says, can't an LLC be taxed as a C Corp? Yes. So we could have the corporation. When I say corporation, remember, it could be an LLC taxed as a Corp. It could be an LLC taxed as a S Corp. The only thing that an LLC we don't use that's a corporation is the 501c3. We use a corporation because the statute says a corporation. Technically, you could use an LLC, but then we have to convince the IRS to do it. Somebody says, definitely need help as an active trader. Yeah, you're missing out on all the deductions. And we've been doing that for 20-something years. I used to get in a fight with this accountant. He's a bigwig. I won't mention his name, but he's like the big trader accountant. I used to write magazine articles, and then he would call me names, and I would say, I'm right, you're wrong. I said, I'm okay not arguing with you. I said, I would just say, you're wrong. Because he would get everybody to be a trader, and then he would, because they were like, well, we want to write off the losses. Well, why are you trading if you're just going to lose money? Don't do that, first off. And he was making a mint off of handling all the audits. Thought it was silly. All right. Now I'm going to change your brain. You're never going to look at this stuff earlier. Somebody says, Clint said earlier, a trading account should be owned by an LLC. Yes. What do we say? Partnership stock. Because we need to have a partner. LLC taxes a partnership. And you could have a LLC tax as a corporation as one of the partners. It could be a 1% partner, guys. As long as it's a partner, you have something called a guaranteed payment to partner. So I don't want to belabor it. I'll get in and I'll show you. There's stuff on there about how to set up a trading business on our YouTube. But your trading account could be an LLC taxed as a partnership. If you want the tax benefits, you get a corporation acting as its general part or as its partner, one of its partners. All right. We're going to dispel some rumors here. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Oh boy, now taxes went down. Actually, they kind of went up. Total taxes went, and it really went up for us. If you look at it, who's paying the highest amount of that little uptick? Obviously, individuals and estates. So we know that the taxes went up, and we know that for individuals it went up. But for businesses, which way did it go? It went down. So if you had to pick a line to be, which one would you be? Me, I'd be this line down here. And why is it so much less? If all the income is being earned by these businesses, why is it so much less than the individuals? Part of it is this reason. It's flowing through. Like the only ones where it's blocking it from hitting you is the 401k and the corporation. And, you could throw an IRA in here if you wanted to. I'm not against IRAs. I just know that if we're going to do investing inside them, with real estate, we need to really have a 401k to avoid all the issues. But I'm looking at it saying, hey, geez, let me see. If I was a fifth grader and you said, which one would you want to be if you want to be the lowest? I'd say I'd pick the lowest line, right? I'd want to be a business. Seems pretty easy. And in tax, you get the choice. Quite often it's up to you. And I use the example of Orlando. Is anybody, if you've ever flown into Orlando and gone to Disney World, You fly into that airport. Let's say you get a rental car and you pull out, and they'll take you right onto the tollway, and you're going to hit a few toll booths, or nowadays they just take a picture of whatever it is your thing on your rental car, and they bill you for it later. But you're getting hit with these things. You're going through traffic. All the signs will take you to Disney World. You'll get there. By all means, you will. But there's an exit right off the airport that takes you onto we call it Sand Lake Road. It might be called something else. But if you type into Google and you do Google Maps and you say avoid tolls, you'll get taken onto that roadway. Might save you, it might take you an extra 10 minutes or something if there's a bunch of red lights. Sometimes it saves you time. But the point is that all the signs take you right onto the tollway, and that there's another road that's literally right parallel to it that takes you to Disney World. And you don't have to pay the tolls. That's taxes. All the signs are going to take you onto the tollway, and all you have to know is take the first exit. Right? Hey, I don't want to be on that tollway. I want to be on the freeway. And it makes life. Someone says true about Orlando to Disney, slightly slow, but no tolls. Exactly. Take the hotel shuttle. Well, there's a third road. It doesn't really exist. It exists in my mind. It's a fantasy road where it's the Autobahn. And every mile they pull you over and throw cash in your car, and that's the tax advantage road. And it doesn't exist in Orlando, but it exists in the tax world. So there's actually 3 roads, and it depends on what you want. You want to go jump on the Autobahn? Well, you better have a good vehicle for it, right? You better have a good vehicle that's appropriate for the Autobahn. Because if you've ever been on the Autobahn and you're in a junker, like everybody's gonna be tearing up behind you. You're gonna scare yourself. They're probably gonna kick you off the Autobahn for holding it up. So but you can. There's these 3 different roads, and like the president drives in the fantasy road because he has these big vehicles that create all these deductions. And I've seen portions of the structure. It goes to S corps and it goes to holding companies, and all that depreciation knocks out most of the income. Uses conservation easements to knock out. And if you don't know what a conservation easement is, I'll give you an example. For Mar-a-Lago, that property, he put a restriction on that property so that it can't be developed, about 2/3 of it, and ends up with a $5 million deduction for nothing. He just gave it to a conservation company. And then he lets people, once a year, they have a gala where you can see all the antiques in the clubhouse. It's literally all he did is said, hey, I'm not going to develop this and make it into a bunch of suburban homes. And he's going to keep it open, so it's a golf course. Well, that's a conservation that runs with that land forever. Nobody can develop it, so it reduces the fair market value. That's the amount that he got as a charitable deduction. And he does that with all of his golf courses. Anybody who knows this stuff's like, yeah, Joe Public's going to look at it and go, tax cheat. And it's like, no, we want to give people an incentive to take a tax deduction for the greater good, and that's all it is. And it ends up working great. So let's talk about some fun stuff. We're going to get into where it's relevant to all of us. I don't want to zip around on the high end. Now you can go to a cocktail party and go, it's conservation easement. I think in New Jersey it was something like 90 million. Anyways, it's these huge amounts. All right, things we'd rather do than taxes. I like these ones. Jury duty, 50%. Miss a connecting flight, 29 or 26.9. Talk to your kids about sex. I'm sorry. I think I'll do my taxes first. 19.45. Oh my God, that cuties thing. I don't know how you guys feel. That's just that ticks me off. Spend the night in jail. 11.58. Drink expired milk, chunky milk. Maybe that's going to be a thing someday. I hope not. 10.28, break your arm. 5. In other words, taxes aren't everybody's favorite thing, but it is going to be for you. It's going to be absolutely, yeah. I'm with you, Manu, on that one. Yeah. I have a daughter. Anybody who has a daughter, it's going to be hard for you to even look at that and go. And my daughter, my beautiful daughter, worked at basically, what would it be? A sex trafficked youth detention center where they're basically in jail for lack of a better word, but they've been isolated. They're pulled out because they've been trafficked, and these are young kids. These are 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. If you see what that type of stuff does, it's horrible. It's horrible, horrible. We won't topic for another day. why is tax planning so important? I want it to be important to you, because if it's important to you, you'll do something about it. So we're going to make it important to you. One of the ways I can make it important to you is to show you how much of an effect it can have on your finances. If things are important, since we were talking about cuties, maybe someday somebody will do something, and maybe they'll have to be needing the bail bonds, right? The immediate, anyways, so if something's really important, and one of the things is, like, if any relative of yours ever gets incarcerated, you scramble for the money, you find the money. I worked for a judge in the criminal court, and guess what? If somebody got arrested, they found the money. They found the money somewhere if it was important enough. And so if taxes are important to you, you'll find the time to do something about it. And so let's make it important to you. So let's just talk that we have our friend John. John is a saver. He saves, let's just say, $10,000 a year, and he makes about a 10% annual return on it. So he's doing pretty good. In 40 years, John's going to have a bunch of money. Let's just see where John ends up. And I'm going to make some assumptions. He's making an after-tax return of 7%. His tax bracket, let's just call it 30. I know that marginal tax brackets, you're only paying tax at the marginal amount. If you go up to a next one, it's not retroactive. You only pay the extra amount on each one. So his amount is dumping into his top bracket of 30%. Doesn't really use, we're just playing around. So his before tax return is 10%, his after-tax return is 7%. So his future value of his account at $10,000 a year is $2.146 million. Pretty fantastic. Now, what if he was able to defer the money that he put in? So he's putting it into a 401k. Look what happens to that amount. All of a sudden, his future account value goes up, but he's also making about an extra 50% return on his savings. And some of you guys are like, geez, but I want to make millions of dollars. Yes, but it's done slowly. Everybody I know that rushes ends up losing. And I see, just to give you an idea, we do well over 5,000 tax returns a year. I know who makes money. And I can see the ones that make money year after year after year. And you know what they do? They're steady eddies. They don't fall for it. I believe in Warren Buffett's theory, like, your holding period is forever. You buy great companies and you just sit on them. But what if we had it the way to, not even pay tax on it, get it into a tax-free vehicle? Then we're talking about, look at the difference. Future account value. And this is tabulating using the same tax rate of how much it would cost you to pull the money back out of a tax-deferred vehicle. So this is the difference between a Roth, a traditional, and a fully deductible. But when we put money into the Roth, I don't really want to pay tax on it. In other words, I want to be able to wipe it out on the back end. If you don't think you can do that, you're wrong. We can absolutely do it. And the way we do it is by owning real estate, qualifying as a real estate professional if humanly possible, and taking that deduction. Or if you have a business which you self-rent, or if you have another business where we can create operating losses that we're able to take and even carry back. So what this shows you is the difference between a tax advantage plan and a non-tax advantage plan. This could be nothing more than I'll show you how to use your house in two different ways. This is that. You'll save this much, at least, with those two strategies, which in turn will more than double the amount that you'll actually have available to you when you retire. And so if we just looked at this and I said, hey, you could either have $2 million or $4.8 million during your retirement years, like, you'd be crazy not to be listening. And that's what I say. Say Kramer does all his investments in a charitable trust. I guess it's for this reason. Kramer has a charitable trust where it's paying out a certain amount every year. The rest of it's going to go to charity. It's probably his own charity. You're hitting the nail on the head. Every high-end household has a charity attached to it. You look at Zuckerberg, you look at the Gates, you look at Trump, you look at Clinton Foundation. All of these, they have them, but not even the famous people. Just about every household, because they know that if they get it in there, nobody can take it away. Nobody owns their charity. Nobody can take it away. So they can pay it out in salary, they can put reconditions, you have to work for it. But more importantly, There's a psychological aspect. We're not going to get into it today, but when you start taking over and stewarding money intended for somebody else, you treat it differently than money that you receive for yourself. And I always use the example of, if I gave you money for your, for your child and said this is for their college education, you treat that money differently than if you win money at a casino or you won a prize. The prize money, you're probably going to go below. The money that's there for a child or for a grandchild or for some purpose gets treated very differently. And so we want to give it some purpose during our lifetime. Topic for another day, right? Life happens. John and Sally, here they are, and whenever people get married, of course they're going to do, the first thing they're going to do is get a cat. Not like cats. Here's come some kids, right? Now I know that's not always everybody, but let's just say